Hello, my name is Lindsay, and throughout this course we have gained an abundance of information in relation to the rich diversity of various species, their ecosystems, and the ways in which humans inherently interact and impact the natural world. Through the lens of fisheries, forestry, and wildlife, we are now able to apply some of this knowledge into a more in-depth focus about anthropogenic stressors, and what we as humans can do to mitigate the threats these stressors pose on other organisms and the environment. Today, I specifically want to talk about the walleye species, which remain vital to the economic and ecological success of the Lake Erie Midwestern fishery. Numerous factors have contributed to the decline of this population throughout the years, including habitat loss, invasive species, and overharvesting. Of major concern, too, is climate change. And throughout this presentation, I will also describe various management practices that have been used throughout time and potential solutions to mitigate the risks of anthropogenic stressors like climate change on their population. I want to start by discussing the importance of fisheries first. Fisheries are an essential resource that need our attention in maintaining and supporting. There is an evident global demand for fish. Data tracked by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations has shown that over 3.2 billion individuals get about 20% of their daily animal protein intake from fish alone. And when we look at more recent figure of fisheries and aquaculture production, we can see that this demand has and will continue to grow. Fisheries in general can be utilized for commercial harvesting, recreation, and subsistence for local communities. In the recent few decades, however, it has become more pertinent to understand climate change and its relation to fisheries. Rising global temperatures are making it more difficult for fish who are used to colder water habitats to reproduce and survive, as well as altering food webs, reducing habitat, and invigorating species competition. Research has also identified an increase in the number of fish kill events tied to temperature and oxygen stress from warming climates across the Midwest. And specifically when analyzing lake fisheries, which is the majority of the types of fisheries in the Midwestern U.S., compared to ocean fisheries, I want to point out a study by O'Reilly in 2015. They found that over the last 25 years, temperatures in lakes across the world are increasing at about 0.34 degrees Celsius per decade, which is more than what is occurring in ocean fisheries. Additionally, Lake Erie has been found to be the shallowest, southernmost, and warmest of the 5 Great Lakes in the Midwest, with surface temperatures reaching an average maximum of 24 degrees Celsius. Climate change is already posing serious risks to fishery habitats by creating hotter, less inhabitable conditions for species like the walleye fish. These impacts are especially pronounced in lake environments, where warming occurs at a faster rate than in the oceans. And when it comes to lakes, Lake Erie faces an even greater threat, with its fisheries becoming increasingly vulnerable to temperature changes. But rising temperatures do more than just stress fish directly. They can have an impact on the entire aquatic ecosystem. One of the most pressing concerns tied to warming is the increased presence of harmful algal blooms, or HABs, in the environment. These blooms are fast-growing accumulations of algae that thrive in warm, nutrient-rich waters, and they are becoming more frequent and intense due to climate change, according to the Great Lakes Integrated Sciences and Assessment Center and the NOAA. But here's where things become even more concerning. HABs are a major contributor to hypoxia. When these algal blooms die off, they begin to decompose, and they consume large amounts of oxygen in the water in this process. This leads to hypoxia and what are known as dead zones. This refers to low or depleted oxygen in the body of water, and it can often lead to conditions where species like the walleye struggle to survive or are forced to relocate. Yes, humans are responsible for nutrient runoff and the use of fertilizers that can end up in lakes and feed HABs, but climate change and warming temperatures overall create the environment where HABs are really likely to take over and deplete oxygen in a fishery to a point of no return. On a side note too, harmful algal blooms in western Lake Erie have caused millions of dollars in lost economic activity annually from Michigan anglers from a study through the Michigan United Conservation Club. The study estimated a $2.4 to $5.9 million in lost revenue for the Michigan portion of Lake Erie alone. And going back to a study I was looking at before, it states that there will be a 20% increase in algal blooms over the next century due to rising lake temperatures, which make for the perfect environment for algae and are fueled by climate change. This problem will only continue to get worse. When we talk about Midwestern fisheries, they are not explicitly maintained through one direct entity. Instead, they are managed through a variety of conservation and research organizations that receive funding from local, federal, and international institutions to monitor and collect information on Lake Erie. Examples include the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Lake Erie Committee, which consists of multiple state partners, other state agencies like the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and even Canadian groups. With the added challenge of the Lake Erie being managed by multiple entities, it can sometimes be difficult to create effective remediation and management strategies. These groups have all worked together, however, in the past to monitor nutrient runoff and water quality in relation to HABs. Even partnerships have been formed between the U.S. EPA and Environmental Canada through the 1972 Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement to address nutrient pollution. And the USGS Great Lakes Science Center has conducted research on aquatic ecosystems using population modeling and fish tagging. The Great Lakes Fishery Commission has ensured that fish populations are protected and managed effectively through commercial and recreational use. They create maximum sustainable yield recommendations and also monitor environmental conditions of the lake. Two notable algal bloom events that have happened in the past include the 2011 and 2015 harmful algal bloom events, and they emerged as a result of excess phosphorus from farm runoff and favorable weather conditions. Because of this, the Lake Erie Binational Nutrient Management Strategy was created to implement a response, and its job was to coordinate actions between the U.S. and Canada to mitigate the excess of nutrient runoff into the lake. Educational programs have been created by the U.S. EPA to restore the fish populations, and additionally, the Ohio EPA has developed a better monitoring system to track water quality and algal blooms. Through research in a study titled Resolving Some of the Complexities of the Mixed Origin Walleye Fishery in Lake Erie, they have also discussed types of stocking efforts to maintain walleye populations in Lake Erie after HAB events. Management has mostly focused on increasing the number of stocked walleyes, especially from hatcheries in Ohio and Ontario. And these efforts have helped offset the effects of environmental challenges, and they do help maintain fishery productivity as well. And as for the actual direct management of the walleye population now, a walleye task group has been created and implemented to identify metrics related to the walleye habitat and its suitability. Additionally, I have found mostly that research papers and the official U.S. action plan for Lake Erie have mostly stayed focused on nutrient runoff management rather than species population management or remediation or even climate change actions. However, NOAA's own National Centers for Coastal Ocean Sciences has been used to develop detection tools and forecasting models for HABs so as to prevent and monitor their occurrence in the future. Here are some of the programs listed below. And just briefly, I'll mention that a study by Wolf described the economic repercussions of HAB events, and obviously HABs create a lot of challenges for people and the local economy, especially tourism. But this is really a difficult decision for a policymaker because obviously HAB events are bad, but also reducing catches or creating catch limits for anglers and for people who actually make their living off of fishing can be a really difficult decision to make. So this was interesting to study, and it's kind of interesting to consider what's best for the walleye population's sustainability throughout time versus what is best for tourism and the economy right now. So the average catch limit for the last decade has stayed consistent at about 6 walleye per angler. So it hasn't quite really changed. My recommendations would be to follow the Lake Erie Walleye Management Plan, aiding in the reproduction of walleye through stocking programs, advocating for habitat protection, doing continuous research, and engaging with policymakers and stakeholders. I will say, too, that a 2023 study by James Sinclair suggested that more nutrient input and an increase in temperature in a lake can actually be good for some types of fish. So it's really just interesting to consider the different tolerances of other species within the ecosystem as well. Finally, I'll just point to this business is better than ever model that I've seen in a lot of articles and research papers just in current news of the walleye population coming back. It has definitely fluctuated over time, but right now it's doing really well. And I think this mentality of oh, let me just go fish and use all the walleyes and everything's okay is not great for long-term sustainability of the fish. So I think more research focused on the fish population and restoration after HAB events is really, really important. And also collaboration among many research groups because HAB events will not go away. We will continue to see this as a challenge. I also think a holistic approach with ecosystem-based management strategies is important too, understanding human and how they tie to the ecosystem and these animals as well.